Today I'll be talking about smoking and smokers in the context of beekeeping. The smoker is, after the hive tool, the next most important piece of kit for a beekeeper. We smoke them, the bees, to calm them down so we can go into the apiary without getting stung or without them getting too aggressive or upset. It's believed that this is an old reflex from after having spent tens of millions of years evolving in trees. The smell of smoke makes them think that there's a fire coming, so they will go onto the frames and they'll start gorging full of honey, ready to evacuate the hive. So for about 15-20 minutes after they first smell the smoke, they will just go straight down onto the frames and start gorging on the honey, so it will calm them down. Also, it interrupts their pheromones, because the bees, they communicate with pheromones in much the same way as we communicate with speech. So the smoke interrupts the pheromones, they can't communicate with each other, so they go to the instinct of gorging themselves on honey. So this is a typical smoker, quite a small one. There's three main parts to a smoker. There's the spout, the combustion chamber and the bellows. The bellows' purpose is to pump air into the combustion chamber. And you will notice that it's not directly connected to the combustion chamber. So when you're not pumping, there's still a flow of air through the bottom, heat rising up through the top. So it'll keep it going. And the bellows will pump extra air into there to make it go more. And then in the fire chamber, we have a little disc, usually in here, which keeps an air gap underneath so that the air can go under the whole part of the chamber. And then you'll notice that it's surrounded by a cage. Almost every single smoker will be surrounded by a cage, because that gets very, very hot and it will burn. So you need to be very careful, especially when you're trying to take the lid off if it's jammed, because sometimes unburnt tar and resin will go around the edge and make it very hard to lift off. So you have to be very careful about not burning yourself. And then there's a hinged lid with a spout, and that spout is where you direct the smoke when you are smoking the bees. And sometimes there'll be a hook on there, so you can hook it on the side of the hive so it's out the way. So the next most important part of the smoker is the fuel. Now it's always a toss-up between burning fast and burning for a long time. So you want it something that will burn, but then something that will smoulder. So it's quite a good idea to have two separate things. Like I tend to go for paper and sacking. So the paper gets it going and the sacking keeps it burning. There's two types of sack. We use coffee sacks. They tend to be the best one, and they're available from coffee shops that roast their own coffee, and on Trade Me or even Hive World. Some of the beekeeping suppliers supply them. They're usually $1 or $2 each, and a sack will last quite a while. There's two types of sacking. There's Hessian, which is a light, easy to burn sack, and then there's jute, which is a much coarser, thicker sack, which is a lot harder to burn. The best way to prepare it is to wash it, just in case there's any chemicals. I once put it through the washing machine, which was a big mistake, because all of the fibres break off and it makes a mess of the washing machine. So it's not a good idea to put it through the washing machine. If you do, then put it in a bag that you put a dog blanket or a horse blanket in to keep the fibres in there. I've discovered the best way to do it is to put it in the bath and put some detergent in there and put the plug in and fill it up with water, and then you can just stamp on it like you would be stamping grapes when you're making your wine, and then you just pull the plug out, let it drain out, and then fill it up with clean water and repeat the process, and then you'll end up with nice clean sacks. One thing you can do is to weather them, the sacks. You just leave them out over winter so that they will rot, and then it makes them very easy to use. And there are some people only use those, but you can tear them, and you know when you can tear them quite easily, then you know that they are ready to go. So also some people use cardboard. So a piece of cardboard and rolled up corrugated cardboard. If you roll up and then put that in the chamber, that will burn slowly. With the sacking, I use organic material as well. So cut grass is good. It burns very quickly, but it gives a very good, nice smelling smoke. Pea straw is very good. The only problem with pea straw is you can get the bits sticking out when you're trying to close the lid, and that becomes a bit of a pain. And a great thing is pine needles. They smoulder really well and give a nice smell. So back to the very end, when you finish with your smoker, there's still burning material in there. So you might just be putting the smoker in the shed, or you might be putting it in the car to take it away. So some people will open it up and empty it into a tin, like an old coffee tin, and put the lid on so it'll go out. Or some people just put it down to one side and let it go out. I find putting a piece of grass in the end, or a cork, just cut down a cork slightly. You might have to buy slightly nicer wine instead of the screw top, but put a cork in there, and that stops the combustion and it goes out. And then next time you go to do your smoker, you're left with the equivalent of charcoal, sacking charcoal, and that burns as good as paper. So it's a very good way of starting your fire next time. So what we do is we just put a bit of newspaper, and I find that this way of lighting the smoker, it will last me all day. One match, and I will not need to relight it again. I need to keep adding to it, but this is a foolproof way for me. So just one match, as long as it's not too windy. So let it burn, maybe put another piece of paper in. Pop the bellows to get it, there's a bit of ash still in there, but so the fire's going. Then we put in some sacking and get the fire going. If you're going in for a short time, don't be fooled by just getting it going a little bit. It's got to be going properly no matter how much you're using, otherwise it will just go out and then it's no good. So now you've got the flames in there, so the flames are coming out. So you put some bit more sacking in and you can push it down a bit, and then you put your organic material in. So I'll start off with a bit of grass cut, and then a bit of pine needles, and then just pump it to make sure it's going nicely. So you know that once it's going like this, you know that it's going properly and it's not going to go out. And then the trick is to put a piece of sacking on top. Now the point of this is that it will help cool the smoke that comes through and stop any sparks coming out, because you want to be careful about it being too hot or sparks coming out, because you could burn the bees' wings, and then that's a death sentence for the bees. So and just pump it to get it going really, really well. And once it's going like that, you put your hand on it and test it. You can, if you've got your glove on, just test it on your face. But you just make sure that it's going well. And if it's flames still coming out, it's hot, just turn it upside down and back that way, and that puts the flames out. And then it's going good, and then you can leave it and it'll be fine. And then it'll slowly burn down, and then what you can do is you just, once it's burnt down a bit more, you just put a bit more sacking on. Half an hour, 3/4 an hour later, and then you just do that through the day. Keep going like that if you need it for the whole day. But the crucial thing about a smoker is to make sure that it's going properly first, because if it's not going properly first, then it's just going to go out. And when you're doing your hives and you're checking them, the worst thing is if they start getting angry. Maybe you've squashed a bee and it's put out an alarm pheromones, they're starting to get a bit angry, and you reach for your smoker and it's gone out. And then, so you've got to then try and spend 10 minutes lighting your smoker, getting it ready, and by the time you go back, you've got an angry hive. But if your smoker's always lit, if you're not using it for a while, say they're calm, that's fine, just every now and again, just check it, give it a squip, just to make sure that it's still going. With regards to fuel, don't use anything toxic to bees. Don't use plastics, don't use any accelerants to start it. No petrol, meths or terps or anything like that. Just use paper and nothing that's going to hurt the bees. Now also you need to be careful. I've mentioned about the risk of fire and burns. That gets very hot. So if this is sticking, you're trying to open it up, you can just use the hook of your hive tool to lever it up and to open it. Sometimes it does get a bit sticky, so you can just pull it up like that. And sometimes if it gets up there, what you can do is you can just scrape it around, and then that helps you next time. If it's windy, you need to light it in there instead of using a match. One of these lighters is quite good because you can light it inside there. Another thing that's quite handy is one of these. So a blowtorch, that will get it going pretty well, but don't fall into the mistake of putting everything in there and then lighting it with this, because then it will be burning from the top and it will be harder when you're blowing the air. The heat's going to be at the top, not the bottom. It's not going to be burning through. And another good thing about the blowtorch is that you can use it, because you do get a lot of build-up inside, so you can use this to burn all around there, and then use your hive tool to scrape all the unburnt stuff off. And this also is great for sterilising your hive tool if you're going to another hive, rather than scrubbing it with soapy water, and that will kill any risk of AFB. But once again, be careful with this as well. So another thing that I find useful is with my toolbox, I've got a separate compartment for the smoker. That way I put it in my car, put the cork in, put it in my car, and it's not going to fall over and it's safe. Sometimes it might be going just too much and it's just going crazy and you want it to slow down a bit. Putting it on its side slows it down a little bit, or you could just put your cork in for a little while just to slow it down. But then you think, oh no, I've just gone through another piece of sack, and that's like, you know, the third piece of sack and, you know, doing this hive. But then the sack only costs $1 or $2. It's not, you know, it's more important to make sure that this is ready and prepared and ready to go the whole time. Now, sometimes also there's the risk of fire with sparks coming out, or say a careless beekeeper might just empty out the ashes and then start afresh. And that can start a scrub fire, bushfire. Maybe it won't affect you so much if you're in suburbia, but it's always a good idea to have a hose or a bucket of water just in case, even just to put your hand in if you get burnt, but also just to throw it on if something catches fire. If there's actually a fire ban and you can't use a smoker, then an alternative is water. You can spray the water on the bees and it will slow them down. I find that when I'm they can start getting angry and they're in the air, you spray smoke around, but the wind blows it away, and then there's nothing, they're not calming down. But I find that spraying water on them around you if they're getting a bit upset will slow them down quite a lot. So some people do that. Also, what some people do is put a light sugar syrup in here, and spray it on the bees, and then they will stop and clean the sugar off themselves and clean it off each other, so that will calm them down a lot. It's a good idea in spring and summer, but be careful in autumn, because then it's a much bigger risk of robbing. So when you come to your hive, what I first do when I'm going to open it up is I just knock on the door. I just put a little spray of smoke in the entrance. If there's a mesh base, I'll just go underneath and give it like that. And then I'll take the lid off, and then I'll just crack open the hive mat just a bit, put the spout in and just give it another puff, less than that, little puff, and then put the hive mat down. And then just give it 10 seconds, 30 seconds for the smoke to permeate through the hive, and just for them to know fire's on its way, time to start gorging on the honey. And then when you lift it off, they're a lot calmer. And it's quite good practice to take off the supers and start at the bottom box, because if you're smoking them, a lot of them will go down to avoid the smoke. And then if you're checking the first box and then you take that off, you check the second box, and each time you're driving half the bees down. So by the time you get to the bottom box, the brood box, that's the most important thing, where you want to check the bees, check the queen, check the brood. There's loads of bees there, and by this time they're getting a bit annoyed, and so it's a lot harder. But if you take each one off first and start at the bottom, then it's a lot easier, and you just give it a little smoke. I give a little smoke around the outside, because if you smoke in the middle, give it a good puff, it'll drive them outwards and onto the sides, so then there's more chance of them getting squashed and it's harder to see the queen. So just a little bit round, and then when you've done that, put the next one on and work your way back up that way. So just remember, with beekeeping, preparation is essential. So if you have a well-maintained smoker and plenty of fuel, then that's one less thing to worry about, and it will make your beekeeping much more enjoyable.